Pay attention. Something very important has just happened at the STF, the Supreme Federal Court, and this could change a lot in Brazil. While some media outlets say that everything is already resolved, Jair Bolsonaro has made a decision in court that could reopen a major dispute in the country. This new action could bring about significant changes and further agitate the political climate in Brasilia. Many people haven't yet grasped the magnitude of this upheaval, but the issue promises to generate much discussion in the coming days. I'm warning you now, what's happening now is much more serious than it seems. Today, Jair Bolsonaro made a new request to the Supreme Federal Court, STF. Many people said that this will not change anything, but the truth is that this type of request can only be made when there is some error, doubt, or disagreement within the court itself. In other words, this new development shows that the situation is not yet fully resolved and that there are differing discussions and opinions among the Supreme Court justices. This type of request can only be made when the Supreme Court justices disagree with each other on a decision. And in Bolsonaro's case, during the trial in the first chamber of the Supreme Court, there was indeed one justice who thought differently from the others. This dissenting vote was cast by Justice Luiz Fux. At the time, his vote went largely unnoticed, but now it is precisely this point that is causing discussion again and putting the legal battle back in the spotlight. The Brazilian Supreme Court, STF, has long maintained that this type of request can only be made when two justices disagree with the decision. But there is a very important detail that changes everything. This rule is not written anywhere. It doesn't appear in any law, it's not in the Penal Code, nor in the Code of Criminal Procedure, and it's also not in the internal rules of the Supreme Federal Court itself. In other words, it's an interpretation that the court has started using, but which doesn't officially exist in any legal text. This rule was created by the Supreme Federal Court itself, meaning it didn't originate from any law, but rather from an interpretation made within the court. Now, this interpretation has ended up becoming a kind of barrier, used in several trials. But Bolsonaro's defense didn't stop there. She decided to go further and pointed to something even more important, an international treaty that Brazil signed and needs to respect, called the Pact of San Jose, Costa Rica. This international treaty guarantees anyone on trial the right to have their case reviewed by another court. This is called double jeopardy. In other words, it means that a decision made by a smaller group of ministers, such as a panel of the Supreme Court, can be reviewed later by the full court, where all ministers participate in the vote. And that is exactly what Bolsonaro's defense is trying to do now, open a new path for the entire Supreme Court to review the previous decision. In the new request sent to the Supreme Court, Jair Bolsonaro's lawyers say that the trial had very serious errors. They claim that the defense did not have enough space to explain itself, that there was difficulty in accessing the evidence, and that the Supreme Court itself may not have been the right place to judge the case. Furthermore, the lawyers also question whether the Supreme Court's first chamber, which conducted the trial, had sufficient authority to decide on the matter alone. According to Bolsonaro's lawyers, Justice Luiz Fux's vote was not simply a different opinion from the others. They say that Fux pointed out serious problems in the trial, problems that, if officially acknowledged, could completely change the course of the decision. But this is not something simple to happen. First, the Supreme Court needs to accept this new request, even if there was only one dissenting vote during the trial. This is the first step the defense needs to overcome to continue with the case. Leave your opinion in the comments, subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, because what's happening here goes far beyond a name. This is about power, justice, and the future of decisions in Brazil.